Good morning, everyone. This is Mimi from Vancouver UFO. Today is June 27th, 2021, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you one of my favorite people, my good friend, Miles Johnston from the Bases Project. Today, he will be talking to us about underground bases and tunnels in the UK. Miles is a broadcast TV professional working in news and sports for over 25 years. He worked in the BBC and with Sky. He's also a documentary maker and an event organizer in the advanced transhumanization field of study. The Basis Project has been forming the public over the many issues in the mid 90s, actually from when YouTube started, and is one of the original channels on YouTube. The Basis Project is derived from the early pioneering Irish UFO Research Center created by Miles Johnston. Um, he was publisher of the Irish UFO News magazine. In the late 70s, Miles focused his work on a sudden explosion of Irish free radio in 1977. The record of this is left for the media and social scientific researchers in the Irish era of pirate radio, and initially distributed to those in the industry on VHS. And it is now available via undergroundvideouk.com. So we're delighted to have you, Miles. And I know that you're going to be talking to us about your courageous work in the dark belly of the beast with the fantastic accounts that you've given with your abductees, experiencers, contactees, super soldiers, targeted individuals, ex Illuminatis, and the works. So Vancouver UFO welcomes you, Miles.
Welcome to Vancouver. It's a wonderful place. I love Canada. I lived there for a year, 1977 to 1978. I have relatives in Winnipeg, or had relatives in Winnipeg, and I knew a DJ in Fox FM in Vancouver. And that was a while back, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really wonderful. I love the American radio. I love the Canadian radio. I recorded lots of stuff when I was in Toronto. And is that right? And all right. I think
We
so.
have some members from Toronto, so they can correct your diction if they're around.
Well, I'll stand corrected. And it was good fun. I managed to get a year out as a student to get to Canada, and they actually wanted somebody for America. So ended up two of my class at the Polytechnic, which became the Ulster University. I did an engineering thing, and then I moved over to specialize in electronics, and that's what I sort of got as a formal qualification. And so one of the classmates was in Detroit, and the other one was me, and I was in Toronto. And I had a relative in Winnipeg, and when I flew to Winnipeg, the thing which got me was, wow, it's flat. There's no water, and when you live on an island like I do with mountains and water, you just suddenly get off the plane. I mean, even when I was in Toronto, you got the Great Lakes. They're slightly
Yeah,
big.
that's
There's a
right.
bit of water. There's a bit of water in Great Lakes. But to go to Winnipeg, I just whoa. And when people from Holland come here, they're used to the canals and things, and they come to this canal, but they're not used to the differences in terrain and the huge fields
Mm-hmm.
of wheat and stuff, and they love the crop circles.
Yeah.
That's where we are here with the crop circles. The
Well, I
whole
wanted to tell you what's behind me. This is the Diefenbunker. The Diefenbunker that John Diefenbaker made in 1959 when they were scared about the Cold War. And they made this humongous bunker to house 535 government people that would be able to live down here in case of a nuclear attack. So this is one of the tunnels that we have now, and this is now a museum. It's a Canadian museum. in
Wow.
Ottawa. Yeah, little town called Carp that's close to Ottawa. So you went down. I think it's 100 yards or so way down there, and then you hit a steel door, and then they had all these other very non-hotel looking type rooms, bedrooms. They had the CBC down there, so that you could still keep communications going in case of a nuclear attack. And thank God we didn't have one, right? So now it's just a museum piece.
That's fantastic. Although they do say that the only reason they sell these things off is because they got something bigger.
Oh,
And the other thing is that they also show you these things. So, well, we've shown you all this, and we're not keeping any secrets. And there's a tunnel, and wow, okay, go away, move. And then they open it up, and then they do what they continue to do. We have a similar one here at Rudlow Manor, which was the head of the UFO project in the UK. And it was a country house, and it's all fallen to pieces. And my friend and colleague, Matthew Williams, does a lot of stuff about tunnels like that. And really, all they're doing is just going deeper and bigger. And these things connect with the ancient tunnels, the ancient hyper tunnel system across the planet.
right.
And would you believe it? I'm sure you've heard of Elon Musk, but
No, who is he?
I don't know. I don't know who is this guy.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Where did he come
he
from?
I have no. That's a good question. And he's got access to two things in the UK: the submarine bases for use as spaceports. Okay, that's Scotland and the south of England, and secondly, the tunnel system. From a
Right.
commercial point of view, he has a commercial company which deals with tunnels, and he also has a commercial company called Neurotech, I believe, and that deals with the interface of nerves with the brain and the external technology. So there, in one little name, Elon, you've got a connection with the super soldiers, remotely controlled secret space program technology, which are actually flown by connecting somebody here telepathically to the craft which is flying around in hyperspace. And I just heard today, courtesy of the Dark Journalist, that Werner von Braun wrote a fiction. He wrote a novel about Mars and about populating Mars. Obviously, this is way back in the 70s. And one of the fictional heroes in that book that Werner von Braun wrote in the 1970s was a character called Ellen.
Oh, wow.
So, this,
Amazing.
so I mean, this is, it's not, no coincidences in this game.
Wow, that blows me away, really. It just makes it just takes your mind to all kinds of crazy areas like clones. I have a bunch of pictures if you want to see them later on when you're doing your tunnels. I collected a bunch of pictures last night of tunnels all over the earth that have been used for populations when they've been in danger. Which, playing devil's advocate, I did want to say that, maybe some of these things are not as nefarious as we think, because in the past they have been used to protect the people.
Yes.
And up to 20,000 people were living in underneath Turkey when they were
Very
experiencing
important.
different wars,
And
right?
it's very important.
So, it may not be as dark as we think it is. Maybe the government does love us, and maybe they are, getting things ready for us to hide out if we need to be.
I think that's crucial to what's happening right now. I think you're absolutely spot on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Miles, take it away.
Well, you mean me? Well, anyway, just so that people see me, I've got this thing on a loop that were a number of little MI5 agents which wanted to know why the hell I was taking video of the Cane Hill Locks. These are the Cane Hill Locks behind me in Devizes, which is a wonderful town on the Vale of Pewsey, and it's also the home of the crop circles. And there's some other. There's a couple of old standing stone things like Stonehenge. You probably haven't heard of that. And another one's called Avebury, which is mimicked on Mars. If you look at Richard Hoagland's work, and the guys who did that stuff way back in the 70s. So nothing much going on here. But the other thing is that there's loads of bases all around here, big ones, small ones. And in your description, you mentioned about a tunnel where the government would go. Well, not too far away from here is a huge underground sort of town, a completely self-contained town, or if you come from Belfast, a town. And that's where the government would go. And it's a huge place. And we know about it because, and I know where the entrance is as well. It's just on the A303. And the A303 is that wonderful road that goes right past Stonehenge, if you can see where Stonehenge is, which is only about 10 miles away from here. But wow. There was a telephone engineer, and he was only put on the job temporarily for that day, and he had to connect. The thing about bases is that at some point they must connect with the outside world, either with water, air, electricity, or communications. And this guy had to fix some communication stuff, and he was at the junction where the outside wires and the inside wires connected. And basically, he blabbed about it, which is why we know about it. He was fired. He'll probably never work for anything like that again. But there's quite a large, substantial number of features around here. And one of the people I interviewed is a young woman called Julie Phelps. And she was a mechanics specialist in engine technologies for the RAF, and she was fairly unique. She's got a very good photograph of the second in command of the RAF actually saying thank you and shaking her hand. These kind of photographs don't happen by coincidence. And she essentially is one of the people who is flying remote vehicles for the secret space program. So that's a long time after she left the RAF, but she got in there. She also specialized in microelectronics and stuff like that. So there's a lot of bases here. And the reason why I do bases is when I came to London to work for Sky Television, I started to get involved with the UFO community in London. And there was a great, really excellent society called London UFO Studies, and that's in the east of London. And just east of where they are, we've now know there's a big fat ET base just in the Thames estuary, just on the northern side of the Thames estuary, near Essex. And we also know that there's a big fat ET base in central London at Holborn, which is also a very major Masonic center. And of course, there's just beside that, there's Temple. And it's called Temple because the Knights Templar did things there. So there's reasons why these bases are associated with these energetic sites.
Right.
And they used to, there were people who we sort of discovered there were sort of errors. And the way you can feel that there's a base operating is rather than having big, control towers and lots of fences and guards and all that, they produce a sort of synthetic reality to cover their positions. And the same happens with things underground. And what we noticed was, and I say we because I noticed it, a Holborn tube station is pretty deep, and it's got an escalator which is pretty long. And one of the problems is that when you've got your reality shielding starts going faulty, or they need to tweak it, is the differentials between the fake reality and the false reality. And you notice that when you just go through the barrier, you suddenly find that suddenly things change very rapidly. But if you're not looking for it, you won't see it. And I noticed that on an airplane every time I flew from Belfast, from London to Belfast. You're doing it all the time, once a week. BBC, when I was at BBC, they gave me a ticket home Monday and Friday, but back home and back there. And once we went over a particular part of the Irish Sea, not far from what they call the Isle of Man, the whole cabin of the aircraft would stretch, just go whoosh and then back. And you notice that the first time, and you keep noticing it. And the similar kind of thing happened at Holborn Tube Station in central London, where the escalator was a lot shorter than it should have been. And then it was a lot longer, which it should be. And that was an example of the reality shielding failing in a deep underground facility. And that's one of the things you can look for when you have a little bit of a problem. I noticed this years ago when I had a French girlfriend. She brought me to Chartres Cathedral. And the cathedrals and the architecture of these technological time-space devices, i.e. churches and cathedrals, they're operating with sacred geometry. I don't like calling it sacred. It's high technology, dynamic, complex number space. And I noticed that when you were driving towards the village, the cathedral is massive. It looks really big in comparison to the rest of the village. Then my girlfriend brought me there, and she was testing if I was noticing this. When you're sitting right beside the cathedral, it's not really that big. There are houses which are like three-story houses in the market square and so forth, and the houses are all very small in comparison to the church, but they're not that small. And that is when there is a perspective error, and they get the perspective was inverted. In other words, the closer you got, the smaller things got, as opposed to things getting bigger in relative terms.
Oh, Miles, can I just stop you there for a second? I'm a little bit lost on this. So, first of all, I'd like to know who they is. You know, if you know who they is, and also what is it being used for? I mean, I've heard people talk about the Bernstein Bears and all this with the Mandala Effect. Are you talking about Mandala Effect?
Well, that's the problem about the Mandela Effect. It's a manufactured reality management system
Right.
of some kind,
Okay.
where local things change, and they also change retrospectively in time. So, as far as the Mandela Effect is concerned, one of the things is the Lord's Prayer, and I
Yes.
think forgive us our sins against us and blah blah blah. Now it's forgive us our debts. Now, a colleague of mine went to a church with one of those big Bibles, those huge big Bibles, and that was an extremely old Bible. It'd been there for 100 years or 200 years or whatever it is, and the text in that old Bible had changed. So
Yes.
that's one of the problems about
I had heard that when you make the switch into a new reality, everything goes, and only people have the memory of the old reality.
because your memory is not stored in this 3D space-time continuum field, energy field.
Mm-hmm.
When you're accessing your memory, that means if it was anyway, you saw that reality disturbance at Holborn Tube Station, central London. And we both mentioned that to each other at the time. And later, there was a targeting of the Holborn Tube Station. But what was happening was people in tube trains were being abducted. They were going into the tunnel near that area, and they were being taken by the Greys. Now, I noticed this independently, and because I noticed that when people were coming out of the tunnel, they were completely switched off. And only when the train actually sort of stopped, suddenly they seemed to all wake up.
Mm.
And then something had happened. So now Simon Parkes echoed that. He actually mentioned about the Holborn tube station, and he mentioned about people being taken in the base, and why when that base took a hit, lots of Greys were taken out. And he's very sympathetic to the Greys and Reptilians. So some energy weapon happened. And then what happened in the immediate area of Holborn, all the electric cables, anything with copper in the ground went on fire. They had a huge fire in all the cable ducts all around the area. And the BBC actually announced it. Thousands of people had to get out of their offices and get away from it. So this is an example of noticing a base, making a few conclusions, and then somebody at some point decides to take it out. So the energy field they use to take out that base, and you won't see it in 3D because it's not in 3D. So they're taking something, an interdimensional energy weapon system is able to take that base out without the whole place full up, you know, the whole Holborn tube station falling into a hole. And that took, one of the other things that happened there was a British Telecom and the electrical supply people had every single emergency team that they physically had in the country were working beside those guys, working to get those cables out, because those cables are made with such lethal chemicals. One breath and you don't have a second. So there were occasions when they had to literally just pull somebody out and give them oxygen instantly, otherwise they'd be dead. And there were, I mean, so that's a real event. It's not imagination. Now, the other thing that's happening beside me on the hills behind is a place called Chair Hill. And that's got a white horse, and the white horses are around Willage. So, I mean, in a similar way that you've got Chair Hill, white horse, and there's it's a wonderful place to come around here. We've got the crop circles and all that. Or we used to, we don't have as many now. But that's another example where Chair Hill is, and actually there's a big ET craft relatively deep, but not too deep, under the ground. And if you look at the old paintings of and drawings of the Avebury Chair Hill, Cheryl area, which is a sort of a mountain area, which is almost the highest spot. It is the highest spot. It's not too far from Milk Hill, but these mountains just immediately behind me, you can't see them, but they're the highest spot between east and west here. And the canal just goes along there. So it's at the highest level between the east and west, south of England. So that's the place that they're likely to have your facilities. It's also a lot of chalk, so it's very easy to mine and drill and put things into. So she picked up on this big ET thing at Chair Hill. That's CHERHILL. So that's just a little bit of what's going on around here, and the crop circles and the interdimensional gateway just beside the barge inn, where we have the crop circles at the East Field. And there was a great Native American called, I think, Rod Bearcloud, I think. Way back in the 90s, late 90s, he got a feeling. You've got to pay attention to your feelings. And yes. He just felt, just get up and bring your camera. And he went up to this place called Knapp Hill. And that is right above, the escarpment goes up pretty quickly there. And that's right above this wonderful big field, what we call a big field. Obviously in Canada, you've got slightly bigger fields than we have here. And he just recorded stuff, and he packed up his camera and came back. And that was where, when he did the editing, he could see a cloaked triangular craft just whisk straight out of the field and just went up in a big sort of arc and just flew away. Now, we now know that was a TR-3B Alpha, and they're screened and cloaked, and they use 3 Mercury engines, which are derived from the technology that the Nazis were working with the Glock or the Bell. And those triangular craft with the 3 glowing bits at the corners.
Yes.
They're man-made, using Nazi technology, and they are the ones which sort of fly and go into hyperspace and just fly all around the place, take it to the moon and back in about 15 minutes. Now, I did ask the Ministry of Defense, since it's old technology, that when they're running uh, my conference in July, normally what happens is that when people run conferences, that they get a helicopter or they get a little airplane and they go and take you around the crop circles. So I wrote to the MOD and said, look, you got the UFO disclosure thing, you've got the Space Force thing. Maybe you could send somebody, the British Space Force, UK Space Command, I think it is, was announced on April Fool's Day, 1st of April. And I thought, well, maybe somebody from the Ministry of Defense could sort of come down and just talk about the whole space thing, and maybe they could just have a TR-3. It's old technology. I mean, and maybe just have one parked in the car park, and it can take maybe six or seven or half a dozen people, whatever, and they could just pay the MOD like a couple of quid, and they could just take them to the moon and back in half an hour and have a bit of a thrill. And then have a few beers in the barge inn, which used to have a thing called Alien Abductee beer.
Right.
So, but strangely, the MOD hasn't dignified that with a reply. I just don't understand these things.
Seems so easy, right?
Yeah.
Well, it would be nice at least if they got up there with really good airplanes or helicopters and did some good film. Yeah. They have so much money, they could really do a good.
Well, I wouldn't say that. If you ever work for MI5, they never pay you. So I'm told. Ooh.
So, Miles, I have a question for you. When you say, just rolls off the tongue, ET bases all around your area, what exactly are you talking about? Are you talking about bases where the ETs are in charge, bases where they're making these biological life forms that you've spoken about before, or bases where they're making some other things and humans and the ETs are working together? What do you mean when you say?
And food. Yeah, and food. That's all of above.
Yeah.
Okay, essentially, basically, London UFO Studies, this guy, Barry King, his father, in the end of World War II, there's a couple of important players here. You've got General Patton, who was bumped off, the Germans, Project Paperclip, and that brought a lot of German scientists to the United States. They created the CIA. There's an ultra-secret intelligence agency within the Germanic countries, because Germany itself was only a relatively recent construct of the late 19th century. And the DVD, it's called, and it's an undescribably long name in German. And they were intricately in control of a lot of the presidents and prime ministers, Stalin, Mao Zedong, Lloyd George, Eisenhower, and they have a presence which controls the British economy through the Cabinet Office. MI6 is compromised. So there's a whole raft of things which have been going on, which I don't understand why things happened, why you lost the Avro fighter, which is one of the finest fighters that were ever built, why Britain lost its equivalent here was the TR2 or something, or TSR2. That was a fantastic jet which we actually tested down here in Wiltshire, and they were scrapped and burned and all that. Anyway, there's reasons why all that happened, why the UK and Canadian defense has been sabotaged at root level at the seat of government. And that goes back a long time, including the civil air aviation industry. But what happened was, at the close of the war, the British discovered a base in Germany, possibly near Poland, and the Germans were working with strange-looking humans and also a strange-looking aircraft. Now, remember, the Germans were extremely advanced. They had the flying wing. They had all that sort of stuff. They were well ahead with what's called non-Einsteinian physics. So none of this has to be extraterrestrial. We've been hampered with fake and flawed physics. So we screw up on our energy, screw up on our aircraft and all that. So that stuff was taken to Britain, and the Americans walked in, and that was all taken to Britain. So during Project Paperclip, you got all the Nazi flying, all the flying saucer stuff, and also the rocket stuff, which is a distraction. The Russians got their lot, but we got the really nasty stuff, as in the mind-controlled MK Ultra stuff, genetic engineering, and the ability to make program-generated life forms. And in vitro fertilization was not created for infertile couples. It was designed and created to make interbred aliens. Now, Maria Wheatley, who's a brilliant local archaeologist, way ahead of the pulse. She's been at a couple of the conferences in the United States, the big Wake and Aware thing, what you call it, Contact and Desert. And she's a local, she's a very close friend of mine, damn fine girl. And she has found lots of long-skulled ET, no, they're not ETs, they're long-skulled peoples in the burial chambers here in Wiltshire. And I don't know if your group have heard of Lloyd Pye.
Yes.
And he did a lot of work, and we were very privileged to interview him during the Amash stuff that I did with a group called the Amash Project with Joanne Summerscales, Dave Hodvian, and David Griffin. David Griffin is the key source of the original Black Goo stuff, which came from the Falkland Islands. No, the George Islands, south of the Falklands, and is an extraterrestrial intelligent fluid, but we'll deal with that. And that is, and this whole thing happened. So they started making transgenic aliens here in Berkshire, and that was at underneath a base called Peasmore. And some of my colleagues who have done a lot of work on this, that's James Casbolt, who's now, don't know where he is, the Grid Keeper, which is Duncan Davis, and a guy called Sohail. Now, that was a group of people, and the fourth guy that they were involved with was actually the guy who was in the book depository while Kennedy was being ritually shot. He was actually in the book depository, standing beside the two CIA shooters who had two rifles very, very close, which then were used to assassinate Kennedy. And he has sat in this room here, and he was part of the James Casbolt Gridkeeper team, and they found the Peasmore base way back late in 2007, 2008. Meanwhile, Barry King had been talking about that for ages, and I was way back in the, I think, 94, 95. Barry brought me with a woman called Lisa Williams, who was intricately involved with Greys and stuff in East London. Remember, the Greys have ETs have a major bases all dotted around the place, and they were abducting her and all that. And her children and children of other contactees in my labs have subsequently grown up, and they're all effectively in the secret space program.
Oh.
So that's what the whole thing's for. You have they are integrating all of this. There is incredibly detailed integration with the ETs, the Greys, the Reptilians, the Dracos, the whole lot. The tall whites, they were thrown out quite recently. The Reptilians were the tall whites. Listen, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So essentially, in vitro fertilization is something that was used to make these transgenic babies, which Lloyd Pye's so-called star child was involved with. Maria Wheatley has discovered a star child type being in Wiltshire here, and as with Lloyd Pye's child, it was a baby born of a human mother, so it means it had to have the alien DNA put into a human egg so that it would work in a human womb. They were born, and one of them is buried here in Wiltshire. And remember, Wiltshire is covered with artifacts, but also, strangely, lots of military bases all involved with this. So there's an incredibly internecine connection with the military and the ETs. And I'll just show you one. here. Now, this is a graphic drawn by Hilary Porter, and it's when in April 1974, the Marconi Defense Base, which is a premier cutting edge base in Farnborough. Farnborough, which is just outside of London, is between the M3 and M4, and that is where there is a major activity of ETs involved with the military. Now, this is where the security guard found an ET going through the key, absolutely top secret diagrams and material in the Marconi Defense Base in 1974. Now, she worked in the base. She was there. She was involved with bringing drawings between parts of the offices, which means she was used to being seen there. They had a complete breakdown of all security. ETs could just walk in, do what they want. So that means that at least as long ago as 1974, British military bases have been involved with these beings, which is why there is, and this is another craft which she actually drew, which came. I'll just go through some of her stuff, and the detail of her. This is again seen at the Farnborough base, and her detail on the underside with these are just there. That detail was extremely important in her ability to see what was going on. And I'm just going to go through some of her drawings here very briefly. And that's, see if I can go backwards. So anyway, I'll get that later. But
what was that?
well, this is the point. This is the point. She has got so many experiences.
Wow.
And now that's a tree of, and I'll just go through some of these. And this is her with the ETs. Now, one of the things, I'm just going to go through these because you can see here, these are her personal drawings, and you can see people there with the greys and children, and it's very detailed in how the greys and the adults are all put together. This is happening in this country, and that is her, and that is her again, and that's another mantid type being controlling her mind. And it was interesting the way that she described inside the craft. The lights aren't switched on. And again, there is a reptilian with the greys, and that's her craft. And this is the kind of experience that she saw inside the craft with these false colors and things. And I'll just go through some of these, some very nice drawings, and that's at Adamski, and that's the Adamski craft, which is remarkably like the German flying saucers. So again, this is what she would claim is her rendition. There's lots of pictures here. I could go through quite a few, but I'll just try and get, again, her personal account with the greys. And this is here in the UK. And that is why, and again, this is one of the triangular craft that we're talking about. Now, since Marconi, you see, this is 1998. So it's long after the original compromised Marconi base in 1974. And one of the other things which happened in Farnborough around here is where there was a mass landing near the Gibraltar Barracks, which is a major army base right near Farnborough. And it's the Marconi base. The Marconi Defense Base then became DERA, the Defense Evaluation Research Agency, which is connected with DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And I think that's run by the United States. So there's an intricate connection with the United States, with Britain, with the Russians, with the Hungarians, with all sorts. And the Hungarians is interesting because of the language and going back to seed races way back before the catastrophe, where we did have to use underground tunnels to survive, and we may have to do that right now. So this is really current stuff. So we'll just Again, this is another triangle craft that was seen in the area. The A331 Frimley interchange, December the 16th, 1996. Now these things are flying around over the A303, the A331, and Frimley is the Manor House area where there was a mass landing 1977. At the same time, there was a landing of five triangle craft and five sister small disc-shaped craft at Rendlesham Forest. The big landing that happened at Rendlesham Forest in 1977 is never talked about, which means that the landing which happened in December 1980, one of the craft was damaged, and it was picked up by a United States transport aircraft, which must have been in flight before it came in. And there was also a space shuttle crashed in the area in December 1980, but the space shuttle didn't officially fly until, I think, July 1981, I think. So, and that's because the nose cone of the shuttle, the heat shield nose cone, was recovered. And the brilliant British researchers, Peter Parrish, and Brenda Butler and Dot Street, who've done so much work at Rendlesham Forest, at the twin bases there in Bentwaters and Woodbridge. This stuff was going on here in Farnborough on the A303 just outside London. So that's a huge base with ETs west of London and a massive base inside London, 2 or 3 of them, and also East London. So there's an intricate connection with the underground tunnel network and these bases. And one of the biggest things that I'll just see if I can find it, is a huge triangular object. There it is. That's, that thing's about, she explained, it's unfortunate, it's the wrong answer. Let's see if I can rotate it. Anyway, that is a massive triangular Manta Ray type craft, and a Vulcan bomber, she explained, would be about that size. So if you could think what a Vulcan bomber was, and this thing flew over Camberley and Farnborough and went in, this is important, went in to land at the Farnborough airfield, which is a relatively small airport, but it's intimately connected with the Cody Defense Park, Technology Park. And the runway sort of disappeared and opened up, and this thing went straight in. Now, I personally saw a huge triangular craft, big, thick, heavy thing with twin tails and rectangular engine bay, fly over my pirate station in right on the border with Northern Ireland on a sunny day as the sun's setting in late April. So as the sun was just getting down in the north of Ireland, we get our sunsets about an hour later after setting in London, and the glint of the setting sun just showed the belly of this craft, and that came in and landed at Machrihanish. Now, Machrihanish is a huge runway. It could take a shuttle, as a runway could in Bentwaters as Rendlesham, but that's one of the reasons why the Rendlesham Forest runway is so long, to recover aircraft during World War II. And also at St. Morgan, which is now the Cornish spaceport. And Virgin Atlantic and Virgin Space will be using that to fly their 747 up, and it's now a spaceport, which is originally connected with the secret space program. That's St. Morgan, that's Morgan, M-A-W, Machrihanish, Farnborough, all these bases. But those particular ones in Scotland and Cornwall were connected with underwater ET activity. And there was the US Navy had a lot of people there doing a lot of stuff, and they had underwater explosives to deal with issues on that. And we're told, now that we're having this official disclosure from Washington, and I lose Washington, we got the CIA, bad guys, UAP, fake space program, and also the Pentagon. And there's all this talk about disclosure right now, and we've got a new group called ICER, which is the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research. But in the name itself, it's pointing up there. It's all happening here in the bases. And that is why the MOD says UFOs have no defense significance because these things have been flying into their bases for years.
Mm-hmm.
They are intricately involved with ETs, all different types,
Mm-hmm.
which is why it's not of any defense significance because they're working with them. And the relationship that we found in Bases 1 with Barry King and um, what's her name? They the way they discussed it, the thing which made it click is the intricate politics, the backstabbing politics, the hate, the matter of fact, we'll do you and we'll screw you up. Basically, just like any normal set of interdepartmental relationship you have in any normal governmental agency, because who needs an enemy outside when you can hate each other's department and fight each other? And that's what's going on. We got a right political mess involving all different types of ETs. One lot eats the other and us. Massive child and human trafficking involved with this. It's just it just goes on. So that's that for that situation. I'll see if I can. This is the UFO that originally abducted Hillary Porter. Just dragged her into the craft. No sort of teleport you up. Just two greys come along and take you. We'll just do here. You right? Come on. So that's a bit of a run through pretty quickly of some stuff, and I'll see if we can find me mouse. I can't find me mouse on this. Might get some more. So yeah, that's it drawn the way that she was taken with her initial pencil, and what was there was a humanoid reptilian. Now something's happened very recently in the last 2.5 to 3 years now. The reptilians have now split from the Draco hive and are now their own indigenous civilization. They've got their own determination in the same way that at the foundation of humanity, the jinn, which are energy creatures and energy beings who were on this planet before we arrived and are quite resentful that we've arrived at. The jinn were given autonomy, but under the angels and humans. So angelic beings and jinn are under humans for whatever reason. And now the reptilians have been given their own self-determination. And while that was happening, the tall whites at Papoose Lake or whatever it is in Dreamland, they were all wiped out. They were told to go and swept off the table, and energy weapons were used to take them out at Paradise in California. And those same energy weapons could be used in a fake alien invasion scenario to cause considerable damage to what's going on. So we need to really wake up on all this. The Draco are very simply here to eat us. And that's what Jimmy Savile, the great guy who was in the BBC, given access all areas, including royalty and all that. And he actually said on a T-shirt, he actually had a pullover on, and he actually used some wool just to sort of say, if I have to, I will eat you. That's what they do. They tell you what they're going to do. If you're not listening, don't complain when they come and eat you.
Right.
Simple as that.
Wow.
Again, this is another picture of her rendition of what's going on in a local town in Farnborough.
Was she flying that craft?
Yeah, I think she was in this one. I don't know. This is some more of her stuff. She's got. Now I've seen one of those. This is a tiny, pencil thin. Well, it looks like a pencil. Again, when I was flying from London to Belfast when I worked at Sky, and I was flying back to run my pirate station with my mate Lawrence, who was abducted by the Fae right in the border area of Northern Ireland with Monaghan. I saw one of those off the wing, off the right hand side. Now, based on where it was on the horizon area, it would have been roughly over the north of England, which would have been near Yorkshire. And I'd say there was at least 50 miles between me and it, because we were just about over the Isle of Man. Again, that bit in the middle of the Irish Sea. And that thing you could see very clearly, and I reckon would have been about a mile long. It was way above the clouds. We were at 34,000 feet or something, and it was just right across. And there it was. So these things are just flying around as they like to. That's a self-portrait of Hillary.
I have a question about these long cigar things that you've seen. Actually, a member from Seattle sent us this incredible video.
That's a fucking UFO, dude. The actual fuck.
But there's craft coming in, and you can see them. You can see the little lights going all the way through this tube. You see the light going through one way and out the other. And the thing took place for about 10 minutes in Seattle, and he filmed it all. So I'm trying to get him to come on and talk about it. He's a little bit shy, but he did send us the video. And the shape of it is just like what you saw. So what did you see when you saw? Did you see the lights inside?